Good morning, everybody. I'm Susanna DeBaca, and I'm the president of Business Publications Corporation and the publisher of DSM Magazine. And I want to welcome you to our series called Lifting the Veil on the mental health effects of COVID-19. Our series is called Life Interrupted. You may know that DSM Magazine is deeply committed to mental health. And about 4 years ago, we created a publication to address that topic. We called it Lifting the Veil because we wanted to reduce stigma. Last year, we added a terrific panel of experts to our program, and the plan for 2020 was to do exactly the same thing. But then the pandemic happened. We quickly realized that there was a need to shine a light on how this situation would have a short and a long-term impact on the community. And this series, Life Interrupted, came together in record time due to an amazing staff and a supportive group of sponsors. I want to give a quick shout out, excuse me, to the DSM team who made this happen. Christine Riccelli, Larry Erickson, Luke Manderfeld, Sean Rakina, Emily Schultz, Yolanda Crystal, Rebecca Zoot, Jordan Croft, and Rochelle Kelberg. Without you, we couldn't have pulled it together this quickly. Luke is managing our video, and we want to give him a little shout out and a little leeway in case, in fact, anything goes wrong with our technology. We're just getting good at this, so bear with us if we have any problems. I also want to especially thank our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor, Delta Dental, our supporting sponsors, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Employee and Family Resources, Make It Okay, UCS Healthcare, and excuse me, I skipped our supporting sponsors, United Way of Central Iowa, and Clive Behavioral Health, which is a partnership with Mercy One. This is the third in our series, and today we're going to be focusing on parenting. We know that parents are struggling to balance work, childcare, and self-care while keeping their worries about health under control. And to these parents, we say, you do not have to do this alone. And we are going to be talking today to experts who can help. So here's how the program is going to work. I'll share a video, introduce our speakers, and start the panelists. At the end, if we have time, I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. I've already received a few questions from people as they were registering, and I've tried to integrate those into the questions that I've already briefed the panelists on. So we'll get started here in a minute, but we first wanted to hear from some parents themselves about how things are going. So Luke, can you roll our video?
For myself, even though now we feel like we have all that time in the world to get things that we've been putting off on the last few months, really mentally, I'm not there.
Some of the best advice I've heard is that how do you give, even if you can only give 80% of what your normal capacity is, how do you give 100% of that 80%? And that is definitely a challenge when you've got a screaming baby in the other room while you're on a Zoom call.
The first few weeks of the quarantine, I made lots of apologies and kind of bent over backwards to minimize the obvious fact that I was doing two things at the same time.
You know, I try to get busy working on some projects, and then something distracts me, or I start worrying again about how we're going to adapt to that new normal.
And 8 weeks into the pandemic, and I don't even apologize. I just say, look, this is what I'm dealing with, and let's just continue with our meeting.
I think it's also been positive, though, to have more time to eat dinner together, without any after-school activities or sports or our own extracurriculars.
I know we had people telling us before that they wish they could do the maternity leave during a time where they're older and they start crawling and rolling over and doing that kind of stuff. And so that has definitely helped being able to see all the little steps that he's been taking on an everyday basis.
Want to introduce you to my coworker? Right there. Mommy! Oh. That's her.
So mommy, I think that's the best part of that entire video. Clearly parents are trying to juggle an enormous amount of responsibilities, and that's why we're here today. So let me go ahead and introduce our slate of panelists. We have a terrific group here. First up, we have Dr. Amy Shriver. Dr. Shriver is a general pediatrician at Blank's Children's Pediatric Clinic, and she's an assistant professor of specialty medicine at DMU. She is also the medical director of the statewide nonprofit Reach Out and Read Iowa. Next, we have Teresa Baumhoff, who is the chairperson of the Iowa Mental Health Planning Council and past president and current board member of the National Alliance on Mental Health, or NAMI, of Greater Des Moines. Teresa has family members living with severe mental illness, and she is an expert on NAMI programming. Christina Smith is the president and CEO of Community Support Advocates, a local non-for-profit supporting 1,900 different individuals. Christina is also a parent to a daughter age 21 and a son age 10 who both live with chronic illness. Next, we have Don Martinez Oropesa, who is the executive director of Alexido, an organization committed to the preparation, career development, civic engagement, family support, and celebration of culture of the Latino community and youth in particular. Dawn was honored in 2016 by our very own Business Records Women of Influence, and she was also awarded a Mid-Iowa Health Fellowship to focus on mental health issues for the Latino community. Next, we have Suzanne Minnick, who is the president and CEO of the Mid-Iowa Health Foundation. Suzanne oversees the foundation's work to address disparities and system-driven barriers that prevent Iowa's children and families from living a healthy life. She is a recognized expert in nonprofits. And finally, we have Ann Starr, who is the president and CEO at Orchard Place, a children's mental health provider in Des Moines that was founded in 1886. With a lifetime of involvement in children's mental health, disability program, and public policy efforts, Ann works to make sure that Iowa's mental health system is affordable and accessible for all. So welcome and thank you, panelists, for being on our program today. I'd also like to thank Delta Dental, who is our presenting sponsor. Delta Dental has been improving the health and smiles of Iowa for over 50 years. They provide dental and vision benefits to over 1.2 million Iowans. And since 2002, Delta Dental has invested more than $42 million to improve the oral health and overall health of Iowans. And you may have read that most recently, Delta Dental and its foundation committed $10.5 million in COVID-19 relief funds. I'd like to welcome Jill Faulmeyer, who is the director of Delta Dental of Iowa.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Jill Faulmeyer, Director of Corporate Communications for Delta Dental of Iowa, and also a working parent. Delta Dental, as a health and wellness company, recognizes the importance of emotional well-being to our overall health. That is why we are so proud to support the Lifting the Veil series and the important messages it brings to Iowans during this critical time. I'm looking forward to hearing from today's panel on parenting in our new normal. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you again, Delta Dental. And now we'll go ahead and get started with our program. The first question that I have, we are going to ask every single panelist to answer. And that question is, what are the biggest mental health challenges for parents adapting to circumstances brought on by the coronavirus. And we'll start with you, Dr. Shriver.
Hi. So in my clinic, I've been seeing just a lot of families with anxiety. So sometimes it's anxiety over just leaving the house. Sometimes it's anxiety about not leaving the house. There's anxiety about the future of our children's education, anxiety about our own health and the health of our loved ones, anxiety about our financial security, and there's mental health anxiety as well. So a lot of people are feeling very stressed out right now. And so that's why I think this is a great panel.
Thank you. Teresa?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is for parents to remain calm in the midst of all this fear and fear about the future, fear, what's going to happen today, whether or not they have enough food, all types of things. One of the things I know that usually bothered me when my kids were younger was the fact that I would ruminate about things. I would sit and think about all the things I had to do, all the what if situations that could happen. And what I had to start doing was to write things down and not let them fester in my mind, for lack of a better way to describe it. So hopefully the attempt to try to end the rumination of your thoughts, I think, is a huge mental health challenge. The ability to manage your emotions and, once again, to remain calm.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, what about you?
Christina Smith.
Christina, I'm sorry.
Not doctor, but thank you. So one of the hardest things about parenting is when our kids struggle and we don't know how to help them. So we see this a lot with parents of children with mental health issues or with parents in chronic illness, but we're seeing this also a lot in this pandemic as well. So whether your kid is sick or struggling with a loss of routine or loss of social relationships, or whether your kids are grieving the loss of an important social passage, so like not getting to be in a play that they've practiced for, or the loss of prom or graduation, or even the loss of a sports season. Sometimes as parents, we internalize and feel those losses exponentially as our kids, because not only are we feeling the loss for our kids, but we also have guilt on top of that loss because we are not able to not know how to help our kid, but also we can't protect them from that. And so sometimes we might also be feeling having some physical manifestations from those feelings, so that we may not realize are connected to that. So maybe feeling an inability to sleep, or irritability, or inability to concentrate, some anxiety was talked about earlier, or some feelings of some physical symptoms as well. And then we might get frustrated with ourselves because of those things are happening. And if we don't start thinking about creating some space to kind of own those feelings, name those feelings, and come up with some positive ways to process those feelings, then they can grow and become larger mental health concerns.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dawn.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm going to speak on behalf of the constituents that I work with, my families. I think a lot of our Latino population, we also have refugees, a lot of them are continuing to work, especially in the rural communities. I think we called all of our families, and what they said was they're not thinking, how do I protect myself, but who's next? I think a lot of the people working right now are in the meatpacking plants and construction and things are, they don't have the protection at work, and they just know that who's going to be next on the line, who's going to be the next family member who gets it. I also have gotten a lot of calls about, losing homes and worried about not paying rent, and not having food. So those are the people I'm working with are going through like just basic life need protections, and yeah, it's a huge challenge right now for a lot of people out there.
I think we could write that down. It's a huge challenge for a lot of people out there right now, parents included. Suzanne, what are you seeing as the biggest concerns?
Thank you. So I think it's just the weight of choosing, constantly having to choose, and whether that's between your job and who's right outside the door wanting help on a math problem. I think the number of our families and parents that are, to Dawn's point, having to choose between whether I pay rent or I can go find food, that are my kids actually able to access the education resources that they're so committed and desperate for them to have, constantly choosing between the health and safety of their family, but their commitment and their having to show up to an essential job, and then how it's not so much if I'm going to contract this, but when and how do I protect my family. I think that's the weight that many are carrying, and I can't quite fathom the weight that's carried on their shoulders right now.
And Ann Starr.
I think there's been a huge loss of safety for people, just on many different levels. Safety in terms of financial security, safety in terms of illness. Some parents are struggling both with their parents and their parents' wellness or lack of, health, as well as with their kids, and fear of bringing home the COVID virus. I think the safety issues and also lack of perspective about, we don't know how long this is going to go on. I mean, 8 weeks ago, we probably would not have thought that we were going to be sitting here today having this conversation still, and yet here we are, and we don't know, is this still the beginning, the middle, the end? We really don't know where we're at. So I really think that you have to start looking at what can I control, and what is outside of my control. And what I have control over, I'm not going to get to see my coworkers every day like I did, or I'm not going to get to see my family members, as much as I did, or in person. And I've lost that for now. But what can I do? Well, I have a phone. I can make those phone calls. I can connect with people. It's finding another way to get those connections met, which are super important to your mental health. I mean, the connections are just absolutely vital. And then reassuring your kids, who are also anxious and don't know what's going to happen. And how do you do that? You don't want to, you don't want to misrepresent things, but at the same time, as a parent, you're the one who's responsible, for that safety and security.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. That's a good way to frame it. Now I'll ask individual questions from each of the panelists. So Dr. Shriver, what are the ideal ways that parents can build resiliency in their homes?
So I spend a lot of time in my clinic talking about adversity, right? There's adversity in all of our lives, and we can never expect that our child will be born into a world where there's no stress or adversity. But right now, the message of how to deal with adversity and stress is really resonating like it never has before, because everyone is really stressed out right now. And when I say, I don't say, are you stressed out? Like, how stressed out are you? And so this is a topic that's really become very important for us as primary care doctors to really talk about. And so when I talk about it, I say, what can you as a family do to support your children and to support yourself during this time? I use a mnemonic that I think is really easily taught and really easily remembered for everyone. It's called CC123. And first C stands for connections. anytime you're feeling stressed out, whether it's from COVID-19 or something else going in your life, you need to feel like you have someone to lean on, someone that's got your back. And it's really important to be more intentional about this than ever right now, because we don't have the connections that we usually do because of our social distancing. So for parents, you need to really be more intentional to find connections and make sure your children are finding them as well. So be more intentional of your connections. And the second C stands for coping. So for adults, we need to have coping strategies that help us take care of ourselves during times of stress. So in other words, your self-care plan, right? So in adults, you have a choice. You can either have a very healthy self-care plan that includes getting enough sleep and getting some exercise, finding ways to laugh and enjoy yourself in times of stress, or you can have unhealthy ways. You might be eating too much or drinking too much or taking other substances or doing other things that maybe aren't so great for your health. So it's important to kind of realize where you are on your self-care plan and be more thoughtful about what would be good for you both in the short term and the long term. And what kids need for that coping, they need to have a very reliable and predictable schedule that helps them feel safe and secure. So kids need to be waking up at the same time every day and going to sleep at the same time every day. And really getting some of the 6 most important tenets of health, right? So getting sufficient sleep, getting exercise, getting good nutrition, having time to relax or even meditate or have mindfulness if you're into that, having really high quality relationships, and then having a check-in every day with your mental health. How are you doing? Do you actually need extra help? Is what you have not enough to support you right now? That's the case for many of us. And then the 1, 2, 3 part is this. It's ways to, have that kind of positive, reflective parenting during this time. So 1 means take 1 moment to stop and to feel and to give. So when your child's doing something that makes you annoyed or you don't understand, or maybe you think they're being naughty, just take a moment and try to figure out what they're trying to tell you. Are they trying to communicate something with you? Emotion, a behavior is always a communication. So take a moment and really ask yourself, is this horrible? And if it's not, try to forgive, right? Try to forgive so much more than we ever forgave before. And that forgiveness part should also apply to yourself as a parent, right? We don't have to be perfect right now. None of us, as we had in that great video earlier, is working at 100% capacity, right? So we have to be able to forgive ourselves for not being perfect, for not being able to meet all of the expectations that are set for us, being parent, protector, educator, mental health specialist, and whatever worker we are. So forgiving kids and forgiving ourselves, and to really steer away from harsh punishment right now, because that's not the thing that's going to help our kids best. The 2 means 2 eyes for seeing and 2 arms for holding. During times of stress, especially, children need extra positive attention. So catch them being good, right? Set them up for success. Give them really easy tasks. Have them see, tell them they're great. Build that self-esteem up for them. Let them know that you appreciate them. And then 2 arms for holding. Everyone needs more hugs right now. We need more positive physical contact. We're isolated from our connections right now. So don't forget, if you're like a 1 hug a day person, like bump it up, be a 5 hug a day person. And then the 3 is, what are 3 ways you can show your children you love them every day? So parenting is a 24-hour gig, and I know that's tiring, but it's really important to really have that messaging out there via your actions, your words, your listening skills. So there's lots of ways. One of my favorite ways is shared reading. And right now we're calling it bibliotherapy, right? So when you read to your kids, it is definitely a demonstration of how much you love them, to give them that shared moment to share words and their brains, and really have that quality time together. But there are lots of ways. And if you have older kids, I would challenge them. What are 3 ways they can show you they love you every day? If you survey like 100 parents, they'll be like, yes, I would like my kids to help me out more in the house. So, kind of challenge your kids. What are some ways you can show me? Do you think taking out the trash would help you? Would setting the table make me feel loved? What do you think? And those types of things really help you become more reflective parent, really help give kids the feelings that they need to become more resilient during times of these adverse experiences.
Thank you. A lot of terrific advice, and I love the mnemonic. So the next question is for Teresa. What kind of calls or questions is your mental health organization fielding from parents who are struggling right now?
I think most of all, people are calling because they want a sympathetic ear, someone to listen to them. They're struggling with their emotions, including grief. They can't relax. We've been encouraging mindfulness and meditation. They've also been looking for online support groups. They want to know where resources are. Some are just confused and lost. They said before there was always an office that you could go to, sit down and visit with somebody, and that isn't there now, so they have to establish new navigation patterns. What we've found out is that a lot of people do not know where the walk-in clinics are. They don't know about Broadlawns. They don't know about Iowa Lutheran's walk-in clinic now. And some are looking for housing. And it's not so much that they need housing, but they have people that are staying with them, or they have relatives that they know of that need housing. And so they're looking for possible resources for that. And another big challenge is multitasking, thinking that you have to do 10 things at once when really all you have to do is make a list and you just concentrate on one thing at a time. Because if you try to think of all 10 things at once, you become overwhelmed. So those are the types of things that we're hearing about.
I think many of us can relate to those questions. The next question is for Dawn. Oh, I'm sorry, for Christina. For single parents, divorced parents, or split custody situations, what are some good management strategies?
Yes, so co-parenting is often challenging in the best of times. So you add chaos and uncertainty, and it can either bring the best or the worst out of any of us. I've seen examples of both. One of the hardest parts of co-parenting is the feeling of loss of control when your child leaves your care. So you add fear into that emotion, and it can get significantly harder. My number one suggestion for co-parents is to focus on what you can control. So, for example, I cannot control how my co-parent communicates with me, but I can control how I communicate with them and about them. I cannot control my co-parent's behavior, but I can control my behavior, and I can try to understand my co-parent's feelings and how those feelings may drive their behavior. As we heard Dr. Shriver say, behavior is communication. And so if, maybe if I'm feeling fear and loss of control, maybe they're feeling fear and that's driving some of their behavior. I can create strong communication patterns and routines with myself and my children and in my home. And I can create really strong self-care strategies for myself. Being a single parent can be very overwhelming because we are asked to fill so many roles within our family unit, and single parents do an incredible job of building this tribe around themselves, this social support system to help with that. And now during COVID-19, where you're have all of these additional roles piled on, and now you're separated from your social support system. So that makes all of these challenges more complex. So my suggestions would be, don't put so much pressure on yourself to be everything to everyone. Your number one role is to be a parent, and to just focus on being a parent. And let those other roles, to to just focus on that and focus on loving your child and creating a space for them to be safe and to be loved and to be heard. And that is what success is for you. And for anyone struggling, to find your tribe, to find your social support system. We talked about connections. Connections are so important. It might look different now today than it did before, but you have to build those connections, whether that's reaching out to friends, whether that and family, whether that's finding an online support group. You can find an online support group for almost anything. If you can't find what you're looking for, make one. But reaching out and building those connections to talk to other people who are struggling like you with certain and similar situations is so important, because how we build resilience is through those connections.
Thank you. Well said. The next question that we have is for Dawn. Dawn, how can parents manage their anger and frustration if they're overwhelmed by the drastic changes in their lives?
So one of the things when we think about anger and we think about and fear is a lot of letting, like it not having control, right? And so what are ways that you can, in some ways it's kind of letting go of having control. And then in some ways we need to regain our control. One of the things that I think about is my Bubby Betty used to tell me, you know, she had lived through the Depression, they've lost everything. And her favorite thing was just, this too shall pass. And so in some ways you just need to let go of control. You need to let go and just say, this is gonna pass. We've been through worse, you know, what is the worst? And we can look to some of our faith leaders. And I'm right now reading the autobiography of a yogi. And it's interesting because during the time of World War II, he doesn't really talk about his spiritual practice, but we look at all of our spiritual leaders and, they had some kind of practice. And so I've been really blessed. A lot of people probably will hate me for this. I've been through a lot of Kriya Yoga teachings in the last couple weeks, actually. I started this pandemic with a retreat that was online. And I'm able to do yoga and daily meditation practice, breathing exercises. And I think for parents, it's really important to remember the airplane, scenario. You need to put on your oxygen mask first, and you need to feed your own soul first. And so there's a lot of things out there right now that you can go to and find. Alexito also has some online classes. We'll be doing some traveling classes next month because I know a lot of travel plans have been canceled for the summer. So you can find out about that from Alexito. And then there is something about gaining control also helps you with your anger and frustration. A lot of people, not just, friends of mine, I think one of the biggest fears that causes anger about this situation is they don't have a big support network of family, or a lot of people are like, what will happen to my children? If something happens to me, what's going to happen to my kids? And really creating a plan and getting control back into your life in some ways. What will you do in your own home if you don't have family? If you get the virus, what is your plan of action? Who are you going to call? That's really important. So, and I also, in Jewish culture, it's, you're supposed to do a mitzvah every day and think of the 100 things you're good for. And I think a lot of times in yoga practice, it's letting go of your own issues and helping somebody else. And there's a lot of ways people are doing great things. We deliver food every week. People are making masks for people. Baking bread or giving a plate of cookies is like one of the best things that I've received over this time. So how can you do something for somebody else, right? And I think there is another Kriya Yoga retreat coming up. And one of the biggest things that I got out of that retreat was go outside. They gave us breaks, couple hour breaks, but it's go outside, get your feet on the ground, breathe the air, and thank goodness it's nice here in Des Moines today. But that's really important to just connect with nature and to breathe. And I think it's another really good practice to stop watching the news, even if it's just for one day, and not to pay attention. You're going to hear what's happening. Or like me, I ask my high school student, my kids, like, what's going on in the world? I don't need to watch the news. Really, I just want to keep them safe, keep them happy. And if something's coming down, if I need to find it, I can go find it. I don't need to watch the news constantly. It makes me really angry. So those are some of the things that I do and that that I hope help other people. So
Thank you, Dawn. Good advice. So the next question is for Suzanne Minnick. How can we work within our community to help improve the well-being of our parents and children?
Well, thank you, Susanna. You know, I think we've heard the theme, the words of connecting and support networks and throughout this afternoon. And I think we've been reminded that it does indeed take a village to raise our families and our communities. It does take a network for us to especially move through times like this. And we miss our network. We have missed our teachers and our coaches and childcare providers, our neighbors, librarians, pastors. You know, we've got this intense recognition right now of our feeling of isolation. And so as a community, what is our responsibility? Well, it's our responsibility to figure out how we step into those roles, even with social distancing, right? How are we going to be in that place of gratitude or giving, as Dawn mentioned, and play our role in noticing, in protecting and inspiring each other, and simple acts of feeding or comforting and guiding our kids. And that's what makes a strong and resilient community. And there are many ways we can do that. You know, I think Dawn on this call is a perfect example of showing up for her kids virtually in her program, but she's also showing up with food on people's doorsteps, right? Acts of kindness. I think of Amal at Common Bond Communities, and for the seniors that she supports, you know, she's helping them figure out how to do Zoom or doing craft kits to keep them feeling healthy and connected. I think of organizations like CFM that are still showing, finding ways to feed their community every single day. All of our school systems that are stepping up to provide meals and reading materials and a knock on the door, quickly stepping away, but checking in on our kids and the families to make sure they don't feel alone. Anne's team, Ann Starr, who is on the panel today, you know, how are they showing up doing telehealth, mental health in so many ways? So I think as parents, our job is to hold on and to ask for help and not be ashamed of asking for help, finding those networks to ask for help. And then our job as neighbors, community members, supporting organizations is to extend our hand to show up in the many ways that we still can, even if it's a bit more removed, a bit more virtual, thinking of those creative ways where we can be present. I remember there was a conversation one time with our police department about the number of our kids that have bubble wrap wrapped around them to protect them. And so that visual of how is it we step in right now and get some bubble wrap around our kids and families and one another, just to give some buffer. And so those are my thoughts for today.
I like your bubble wrap analogy, Suzanne. So the next question is for Anne. who works with high-risk children. So the question is, how does social isolation or interruptions in daily routines affect parents of kids who are already at high risk? Anne?
Right, so I think the good news about emotional or behavioral problems for kids is that they're diagnosable and treatable, right? So that's a great way to start off as a parent of a child that has a disorder, is remembering that. And it's harder to do that when you're in isolation and sequestered and facing lots of other stressors in your life, but we get really great outcomes. And it's important that they stay connected with those mental health resources. It looks a little different today than it did 8 weeks ago. So there is telehealth available. If someone doesn't have internet connectivity, you can do sessions by phone. Most mental health providers in the community are still taking intakes and new referrals. I see Christina nodding as well. If you want more information about where to find those resources, if you aren't already connected, NAMI is a great resource. I would also say Your Life Iowa, that website has a lot of really good resources for that as well. But, you know, reach out, get connected if you haven't been already, and you think, oh, I'll just wait till all this is over. It's probably a good idea now, right? Not to wait any longer. I also want to send out just a word to parents who have children that are on medications. And you know, if people have financial concerns during this time, they may think about discontinuing the medication or decreasing it in some way to make the prescription last longer. And I just want to say, please don't do that without talking to your physician. And there are ways, both through your pharmacy, your primary care physician. There's an online place that you can go and look for good prices on medication that I'll give to you, Suzanne, and you can push it to your website. But it's just really important not to just stop or decrease those medications or increase those medications without consulting with your physician. And I think just more urgently, if you have more urgent or crisis kinds of needs, the Your Iowa, yourlifeiowa.org site is a really good place to go. Again, they've got crisis line, they've got chat, they've got text capability, and all kinds of resources that they know about all around the state. I also mentioned it's difficult to keep your perspective during this time, and I'm just going to echo what everybody else has said about surrounding yourself with those connections, those people that care about you and care about your child. We've all been in the spot. If you have a child that has a mental health issue, you know, you've been in that spot where you sometimes feel worse after talking to somebody because they don't necessarily understand what you're going through or what your child is going through. And you really need to find those people that are going to be supportive of you, supportive of what you're trying to do for your child. And so I guess what that means is some of these other people you might, you know, kind of let go by the wayside until you're at a point where you have more time to socialize. And you aren't so focused on trying to take care of your family at this point in time. But it's not helpful to have people either blame your child for their mental health disorder or even to blame you and say, well, that's just, you know, bad parenting. You just, at this point in your life, you don't need that kind of criticism or judgment. So if you're listening to this and you're not a parent, but you know parents, you know, take that to heart too and think about how you can be supportive and caring and kind to those parents. I think, you know, we are, as humans, you know, we looked at day one of this and we thought, oh, this is, as parents, like, this is like a snow day, right? Where you're going to have a day or two off and then the shovels and the snow plows will come out and or eventually the snow will melt, right? Well, it's obviously it's turned into something much larger than a snow day. And so over time, we may have let our structure, our rules, our schedules, go by the wayside. Some of the things that we did together as a family, eating at the table together, maybe we aren't doing that anymore. Maybe people are taking their snacks or their dinners and going and sitting in front of the TV. So as a parent, it's really important to get that structure back. The second most important thing next to connecting with treatment, because treatment works, is to have more structure. And all of your kids and you too will benefit from that. So what does structure mean? So structure is like a schedule for the day. When are you going to get up? When are you going to go to bed? It is who's going to do what chores? When are we going to have meal times? You can get specific on it as far as like, what are we going to have for meal times? Sometimes kids really like that. But before you do that, you need to like warn your family that you're going to reset things, right? That you're all going to sit down and have this conversation because you want them to be a part of it. Because what we've seen throughout this pandemic is that slogan, we're all in this together. Well, your family needs to all be in it together as well, and we'll do better and we'll be stronger for having done that. And so sit down with them and get a schedule, write it down on paper, talk about the rules. The rules may be the same and you may have more now. I think about the safety rules that we're following now that we didn't have 8 weeks ago. We don't leave the house without a face mask.
These are great points. Thank
Yep.
you very much. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a couple of reminders of things you might want to do, and then we'll open up for questions with the little bit of time that we have left. As I mentioned, this is a 6-part panel series, and next week we'll be looking at small business interrupted. So if you know folks who, even if we're opening back up, restaurants, salons, any kind of small business has been interrupted, and we know that's had a lot of stress for owners and proprietors. Most people have been affected by their workplace going remote. And then finally, something that's come up here and on every panel is that equity and inclusion have been dramatically impacted by the pandemic. And so we're going to be looking at that on Friday, June 5th. You can register at dsmmagazine.com. Lifting the Veil -2020. And if you are not already enjoying our products, I'd encourage you to sign up for our free newsletters. They come to your inbox, DSM Weekly Weekend, IA, which is our love letter to Iowa or Wealth. We look at arts and culture, food and dining, and more, and even mental health and other social issues. Our print product, DSM Magazine, is available by going to our website. But most importantly, since you are interested in mental health, we will be doing our regular Lifting the Veil event on November 19th. So make sure you mark your calendar. So now just some questions. And I also want to ask a solution question. And I will start with Dr. Shriver. There's a lot of telehealth options available now for both parents and kids. Can you give us any advice on parents who are seeking telehealth solutions for their mental health issues?
Well, if you are seeking help for your child, the first step would be to call your pediatrician's office. So as you know, like accessing mental health services can be a challenge. And there are some limitations to who's out there doing what, but you can always rely on your pediatrician and family practice doctor and nurse practitioners to help you with your initial needs and then help you find that referral needed. And we in our office and most offices across the state are doing both telehealth and virtual visits, which are via like a visual at-home service to help you so they don't have to come into the office and can be safe. So my recommendation for you, if you're looking for some resources for your child, is to make your first stop your pediatrician's office or your primary care doctor's office. And we do have lots and lots of options for you other than coming in person, so you can stay safe. And I do a lot of management of some base mental health issues with my patients, and then we all can recognize our limits and make sure we make appropriate referrals. I always think of every child as my child, and so if I'm not meeting all of that child's needs, I'm like, well, if that's my child, I'd want them to have an expert weighing in, so I make sure that they're connected to the expert. So that's my recommendation, is definitely spin and chat with your call primary care doctor office and start there.
So we did have one question that was chatted in, and I'll ask Christina if you can weigh in on this. If you're an employer and you have an employee who's a parent who is dealing with childcare issues at home, and they may not be responding to calls or showing up on time because they're juggling all these things, any advice to an employer on how to support a parent?
That's a good question. I think it's based on what you need from that employee, obviously, but how we're handling it is that we're trying to be as flexible as possible. Okay, Seth, I'm on. Sorry. See, I'm parenting right now as well. But I would. We try to be as flexible as possible with our staff, understanding that the many juggles that they have, while trying to encourage them to meet the needs of the roles that they're having. And so we're working as a team. And so we're looking at trying to give them as much flexibility in their work schedule as absolutely possible so that they can meet the needs of the roles of their work, and as well as and then relying on each other. And so we're trying to team up people and then asking them what they need. But I would just sit down with your human resource people and try to build in as flexibility and communication. I saw that question, and the whole response back, the whole thing is just make sure that people have space and the ability to tell you what they need, so that the end, and then try to give them what you can, in the confines of, but as a business owner as well, you also need people to be able to do their work as well. So that balance is hard.
So we have just about 5 minutes left, and so I'm going to ask, it's a difficult question to say a 30-second wrap, but what I'd love to hear from each one of you in 30 seconds or less is, what's a positive that can come out of this situation, or a positive message that you would like to leave for parents? And I'll just go in the same order. Dr. Shriver?
A positive is that it's what was said by Ann Starr. We are on this together. I mean, we're stressed out, you're stressed out, you're stressed out. This whole Brady Bunch gathering is stressed out. And never before in the history that I can remember has everyone in the world been equally stressed out. So it is somewhat of a comfort to know that we are all in this together, and that everybody is more understanding now and more supportive than we've ever been. And we do have new opportunities to learn what's really, really important in this life. And frankly, the secret to this life is all about relationships. Good, high quality relationships with each other, support each other. And the rest of it is sort of just the icing on the cake. But now we're getting back into what really, really matters. And that's relationships with our kids, relationships with our family, and then our very important coworkers that we maybe took for granted before. So I would focus on how much more we feel the value of our relationships.
That's wonderful. Teresa, your 30-second positive ending message. Did we lose Teresa?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Okay.
Okay. I was just going to say that before this all started, everybody was worried about whether or not they were spending enough quality time with their kids. And I think now, I think in looking back when this is all over, we will appreciate the change that was able to occur, that you were able to spend quality time with your kids. And I think it would be great if people could write down their memories, you know, the happy memories of how they worked together and were strong as a family, and they were able to move forward.
Terrific. Christina, what's your positive message to leave us with?
So in my experience working with families with critically ill children who also parent in isolation, uncertainty, and fear, they would say you have been given a wonderful gift of time with your children. So be present in this moment and spend time with your children. Use the shared experience to grow that relationship and find joy and gratitude in each day.
Wonderful. Dawn, a positive final comment for 30 seconds?
30 seconds, yes. Just breathe, be kind to yourself, kind to your kids, kind to other people. There's a lot of people out there that are hurting greatly and don't have as much support or access to services as a lot of us that are blessed to have internet and things do. So find somebody you could be kind to, but really let go of expectations of yourself. Be now, be here, and breathe. Thank you.
Wonderful. Suzanne Minnick.
I'm going to say be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and what a great opportunity we have right now to celebrate the kindness of others. Let's lift up those connections and acts of kindness and not acts of divisiveness that sometimes can take the headlines.
Okay. Ann Starr, final thoughts?
Yeah, we're better and stronger than we think we are, and particularly when we're connected to each other. And the kindness is something that keeps coming through my mind too, is kind to yourself, kind to others, you know, and making it very intentional to do that every day.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've talked about a lot of very important issues, uncovered some of the things that are serious, and hopefully had some ideas and some ideas about resources. So I want to thank everyone for coming, but I particularly want to thank our sponsors who made this event possible, in particular Delta Dental of Iowa, our supporting sponsors, United Way of Central Iowa, and Clive Behavioral Health, which is a partnership with Mercy One, and our sustaining sponsors, the Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Employee and Family Resources, Make It Okay, UCS Healthcare, and Des Moines University. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you for caring about mental health, and thank you for helping to lift the veil. Have a nice day, and this concludes our program.